Good afternoon, friends. Stephen Benoon here. You're watching Israeli News Live, and we do have breaking news, something that's not even made any headlines anywhere that I am aware of. Of course, the President Donald Trump has sent military force, a lot of ships, over into the region of the Persian Gulf. We knew that Israel had also sent some submarines over there. This news we've been talking about for a little bit of time there. But today, or tonight, in fact, Iran has threatened the United States that if they do not move the ships out of the region, that those ships shall become Iranian targets. So this is something that was revealed to us this evening, and we have gotten information from the Pentagon that indeed that the Iranian forces are threatening that if President Trump does not move his ships from the region of the Persian Gulf in this what appears to be a warlike posture, that they will become targets by the Iranian military. There's some pretty provocative words coming out of Iran right now, but you have to understand too, as I also got some further clarification of things that are going on, the situation right now for Donald Trump is not the best when it comes to going to war with Iran at this moment. Although we have been told that this war is imminent, I've gotten this from Israeli sources that the war is imminent, that it is coming, it will come to pass. But for Donald Trump, especially with his presidency kind of in a looming state right now, whether or not he will remain in power or whether or not Biden would take over, is very difficult for him to get the support he needs to carry out a strike on Iran. Now, that being stated, we know the time is coming, though, that the cards will be laid on the table. And we'll just have to see what happens. Will President Trump remain in power, or will Biden end up replacing him? I've been told by numerous sources, though, that the president is going to remain in power, that there's 4 different scenarios that can still be played out that would help keep him in power. But quite frankly, I don't think the 6th is going to be that time frame. I don't think that what they're trying to get the people to do, like Alex Jones trying to get the people to go to Washington, D.C., be civil disobedient, to me this is not the right moves whatsoever. And at the end of the day, you have to remember, even with President Trump, you still have a globalist in the White House. Even if he does remain in power, it's not going to change anything. He is still for all the warp speed, making sure everybody in the nation is vaccinated. He is very much behind the agenda of Israel, regardless of what that might be, which includes, by the way, taking Iran down. But I was told that he has actually been putting on pressure on Israel for Israel to go ahead and to make that move themselves. Granted, as long as Trump is president, he would have Israel's back. But even Israel has seemed to be somewhat reluctant in striking full force against Iran, and no one can quite figure out why they haven't done it as of yet. But then again, we know that Iran has technology that even Israel is unable to mitigate. Iran has the ability to take control, as we've seen in the past, of drones, using some sort of a laser technology, and land those drones in their own country. Imagine what they might do with an F-35 if it was flying closer to the border. But Iran has been very guarded about keeping that part of their hand secret and close to them. It's one part of their hand they haven't revealed in all this fighting and the debacle that is going on as of right now. But we'll just have to wait to see what's going to happen. Also, there's some other things I wanted to share with you. And got this information here from a good friend in Israel, Israeli journalist. Direct confrontation develops between Israel and Yemen, and we're actually quite familiar with the information that came in on this already. As I shared with you here on Israeli News Live before, the U.S. Special Forces and Israel, we already knew, were involved in the war with Yemen. In fact, that's what's turned the tide to some degree against the Houthi rebels and their advances that they were making. But this letter here I got in today said the Houthis in Yemen have been pumping out claim that Israel is actually aiding, and not only in intelligence, the Saudi war effort that has been going on for 6 years in the fight against the Houthis. And one of the leaders of the Houthi leadership claimed this week that from day one, Israel has been working alongside with Saudi Arabia. Well, that part may be true, but as I said, we do know more recently that even the United States Special Forces Green Berets were sent into Yemen. In recent days, there has been, as we continue on reading this, a battle and exchange of threats between Israel and the Houthi government in Yemen, which relies on Iran's help and enjoys the guidance of Hezbollah officers. The Houthis issued a severe warning to Israel. It is better for Israel to take care of its affairs and takes military action, take care of its affairs, and if it takes military action against the Houthis, a war will break out that will severely damage Israel. And the Israeli Chief of Staff, Aviv Kachavi, also issued a warning about attacks against the Israeli targets from Yemen territory. He said it should be assumed that despite the long range, about 2,000 kilometers separating Yemen and Israel, the Houthis may receive cruise missiles and possibly also attacking UAVs and will allow them to hit Israel in a style of missiles launched they can carry out deep into the Saudi territory. Well, in regards to that right there, we have been briefed on the fact that yes, indeed, those ballistic missiles have been sent to the Yemenite military. What's even stranger, though, is that the Jordanians have been helpful in facilitating that move, a country that Israel has always given an umbrella to. Now, we don't know if that's the Jordanian government or whether or not that's rogue factions within Jordan, but as it's been clearly stated, Amman has been a vehicle for getting those weapons inside Yemen for the Houthi rebels. And yes, we do know exactly what the Houthi rebels' capabilities were deep inside of Saudi Arabia. Notwithstanding, though, the Houthis are really no match when it comes to Israel. And we do know that. The Houthis know that as well. And quite frankly, when it comes to that, the Houthis' only big brother is Iran, which are the ones supplying them their weapons and their technology that they're receiving now. But again, the U.S. is the big brother for Israel. So all in all, everybody seems to have a bigger giant when it comes to this war. I continue on in the letter here. The Houthis now control large parts of the country, including the capital of Sana'a, and are now fighting for control of the oil wells of Marib province. So far, they have not been able to gain control of this area. In its movement, deeply rooted in the Yemenite conscience and happily receives help from Iran, Iran is very comfortable if revenge comes from the recent assassinations from Yemen. They are also thinking of attacking from Iraq and have transferred UAVs and cruise missiles to their malicious bases there. But while in Iraq, they can operate without permission of the government in Baghdad. Then Yemen, they must convince the Houthis that they have nothing to fear from the IDF, a physiological barrier that has so far prevented them from taking any offensive action. The Houthis even published a message in Hebrew today, and this is what it says in English. We monitor all the movements of the Zionist entity, supervise all its provocations and its preparatory criminal acts. Our eyes do not ignore the movements of the Zionist enemy in the area, and we must understand that the severity of the warnings from any reckless act or unpleasant adventure, the Zionist entities think it will stretch its muscle on the people of faith and wisdom. So we tell them that you are not scaring Yemen, its people, and its leadership with these threats. Now we can confirm also that yes, it is a fact, and it is indeed true, that the Iranians have moved ballistic missiles not only into Iraq, but also into Syria and Lebanon. Some of the intel that we've received that this is something that has actually taken place. In fact, earlier today I was on the phone, a good friend of mine, Brother Gary, and Brother Gary was sharing with me, reminding me of the dreams that he had years ago. And he said, don't forget, there would be 3 missiles that would be fired from Syria. And one of those missiles would have a drastic consequential effect upon or near the city of Tel Aviv. And then he told me he saw in the vision that he had Israel using a single pilot fighter plane would launch a nuclear-capable missile at the city of Damascus, effectively vaporizing the entire city. When I spoke today with a good friend of mine in the Pentagon, he was able to confirm that the only way that Israel would actually use a nuke against Damascus would be under the pretext of such a cataclysmic, even if it wasn't a direct strike, but an attempted strike of any type of nuclear device on Tel Aviv, that Israel would take that big of a drastic step. And then I began to think about another thing that came to me just in the last couple of days. There are more than one dirty bombs floating around the Middle East right now. And no one is really for certain where those weapons have gone to. Although we do have technology that we're capable of tracking quite a bit of that information, we still don't know for sure where these weapons are at. It has been suggested that the Yemenite Houthis may very well be in possession of at least one. I'm Stephen Benoon. You're listening to Israeli News Live. Good evening and Happy New Year. And oh, by the way, let me give a shout out to my good friend Emilio. Emilio, my brother, it was good to talk to you today. We love you. We miss you. We spent many, many years together. And he is a real precious brother down in Fort Myers, Florida. God bless you, Emilio. Have a good afternoon. Thank you for watching. Stephen Benoon here with Israeli News Live. May you all have a blessed New Year. I normally sleep mine off. I don't really care about the celebration part of the aspect. So keep us in your prayers, our family in your prayers, and keep all the people in the Middle East in your prayers. And let's don't be prejudiced about it, regardless if they're Israeli, if they're Christian, if they're Muslim, if they're Syrians, people from Lebanon, Yemen. These people need prayer, and Iran as well. I'm Stephen Benoon with Israeli News Live.